Senator, you can go on, Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Bondi. Three things. One, I do have some concern that whoever is the Attorney General, you or anyone, is going to be presumably, will be under a significant amount of pressure at some point from the President. Attorney General Barr was, Attorney General Sessions was. Yeah, and you've made it very clear your client is the Constitution. I think that's very reassuring to us. But the President does have now a Supreme Court provided immunity. And I just want to express to you my concern, and it really does align with what Senator Schiff said. You have what I regard as a very bad decision by the Supreme Court. The President should not be above the law, never has been. And my concern on the basis of statements that President-elect Trump has made is that he does identify people as political enemies, including Senator Schiff, and there may come a day where there is pressure on you. And I'm just going to express my hope that that independence that you've had throughout your career when it comes to the Constitution or pressure from a higher official, that you're going to choose the Constitution. So you don't even have to answer that, but it's a concern I share, I think, not just with colleagues here, but with many Americans. My colleagues have made the case about weaponization in this administration. We can have a debate about that, but there's been a universal statement here that we want the rule of law to be the basis of going forward. So thank you for allowing me to say that. Second, I'm really interested in your focus on how do we cut down on recidivism. I was a public defender. That's how I got started. You started prosecutor. In Vermont, prosecutors and defenders were good friends. We each had a job to do. But my experience with my clients, and I'm accepting folks who just, they're really dangerous. You've got to lock them up. You've got to throw away the key. But the vast majority of people had a substance abuse problem, oftentimes had very limited education, oftentimes face these incredible dilemmas that Senator Coons was talking about, where they get fines and they get their license suspended, so the job they had now they lose. So can you just elaborate a bit on what you want to do to inject some energy into dealing with cutting down on recidivism?
Well, first, we can address it at the Bureau of Prison level, of course. What we talked about, those are for the people who will be locked up in prison serving sentences, to make sure they get the resources that they need upon release. 98% of the people in the Bureau of Prisons will be released. I believe it's a mess right now, a mess. And when you look at an organizational chart of the office, assuming I may get confirmed, I was looking at all the slots, and my eyes went down to the bottom to Bureau of Prisons because of my career experience as a prosecutor and caring about what happens there for the very reasons you said. We need more drug courts, and you were talking about drug addicts as well. Mm-hmm. It's more than that, and we both know that. It's also people who are dual diagnosed, meaning you have a drug addiction but also mental health issues, and that's
well,
Senator,
I'd like to.
I can't wrap my head around yet.
Right. I'd like to work with you on that. And then the third thing is that I mentioned this earlier: the consumer issues, the False Claims Act efforts that you can bring, the challenge to ripoffs in the civil sphere, where companies are doing things that are just crushing our consumers and charging ripoff in overcharging. That is very, very important, and I hope that there'll be as much emphasis on protecting consumers as there will be on protecting public safety, which obviously is a high priority for you and for the department.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're doing incredible today. I'm not surprised. Mom, how are you doing?
Don't waste any time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this hearing. Ms. Bondi, thank you so much for the visit to my office. A couple of things. First of all, congratulations on the nomination. And Number two, a couple of Vermont things that we talked about. We're going to have a new U.S. attorney in the state of Vermont. And in the last Trump administration, the Justice Department and the Trump administration worked closely with Senator Leahy, Democrat, and with Governor Scott, Republican, and came up with a consensus choice. And I seek your assistance in helping make sure that we are successful in getting a very competent U.S. attorney in Vermont, and hopefully with the cooperation of Governor Scott, our Republican, as I mentioned, and Senator Sanders and me.
And Senator, as I discussed with you in our meeting, I look forward to working with you and cooperating with you and learning about many of the issues you have in Vermont.
And thank you. And then on that, by the way, one of the issues we talked about, we are one of 2 states that does not have a residential reentry program. That is outrageous in my mind. I know you worked on the First Step Act, but our federal judges, our federal prosecutors, our federal public defender are all in support of a residential reentry program. Our state and Hawaii are the only 2 states without it, and our justice system and officials believe that we need it. And I seek your energetic assistance in helping us get that residential reentry program.
Can I address that, Senator?
Yes, I'd like you to. Thank you.
Senator, I didn't realize that you were the only 2 states without a reentry program. We started that when I was a prosecutor, and those are so vitally important. One thing that I just learned is the Bureau of Prisons, 98% of people in the Bureau of Prisons will be released. They're not serving life sentences. So we must do everything we can when people are in prison to help rehabilitate them for when they get out. And that's why reentry is so
That's really
vital.
helpful.
But we tell people, get out of prison and become a productive member of society. Go get a job. Yet people don't know how to go find a driver's
Well, I
license.
appreciate your help
They don't know how
on
to
that.
get to
So
work.
thank you very
Yes,
much.
Senator.
And I have confidence that you will do that, given your history on the First Step Act and other things that you did. The next, I do have some concerns, not so much about you, but what President Trump has said about a desire on his part to go after what he considers to be political adversaries. You know, he's his own words, for instance, says that if he's elected, he'd seek to appoint a special prosecutor to go after Joe Biden. I assume you've had no discussion with President-elect Trump about that?
Absolutely not.
And he...
Nor
has
against Senator Schiff. I'm looking at your next one.
Well, my colleague, Senator Schiff, who I think did an incredibly good job, President Biden had different points, or pardon me, President Trump had different views about that, where he said on a number of occasions that he should be prosecuted, that everybody on the January 6th committee should be prosecuted for their lies and treason. No discussion about that.
No, Senator.
And Liz Cheney also, he's said that she should be prosecuted for lies and treason as well.
We have had no discussions about Liz Cheney.
All right, and you've satisfied me that this is not an agenda you have. President Trump has satisfied me that when he says things that are pretty provocative, he's often serious. And as Senator Cruz wants, I want, and that is to have a Justice Department that is not going after people on the basis of them being political opponents. And my understanding, in listening to your answers to questions along this line, is that you have no intention of pursuing people on the basis of them being a political opponent.
No one will be prosecuted, investigated because they are a political opponent. That's what we've seen for the last 4 years in this administration.
Well,
People will be prosecuted
Okay.
based on the facts and the law and fairly,
All
Senator.
right, that's good.
You
I
have my word.
disagree about the characterization of the past 4 years, but we don't have to discuss that, with your assurance that the next 4 years, there'll be no effort on the part of the Justice Department to pursue political adversaries, right?
Every case will be done on a case-by-case basis. No one should be prosecuted
All right,
for
just
political purposes.
Thank you.
Absolutely
I
not.
just have a couple of other things. One is the False Claims Act. Senator Grassley, thank you for that False Claims Act. In Vermont, there are incredible challenges for folks trying to get health care. It's really expensive. And there was a shocking report in the Wall Street Journal about a major insurer that is ripping off taxpayers by overbilling, overprescribing on Medicare Advantage, billions of dollars. And the report indicated that insurers are adding diagnosis basically to make money, not to help the patient, that insurers sent nurses to find diagnoses that doctors didn't find, that insurers got paid to cover patients who were already getting your coverage through the VA, and it adds up to billions of dollars, and Vermonters are struggling under the weight of incredibly expensive health care. The False Claims Act, Senator Grassley authored, is an area where the Attorney General can protect consumers against ripoffs. I'm not asking you to comment on this particular Wall Street report, but I want your assurance that in addition to fighting crime, and we're all for you doing that, you're going to be there protecting consumers and taxpayers from ripoffs.
Absolutely, Senator. When I was Attorney General, we went after a pharmaceutical company. It was Medicaid fraud. I can't remember the settlement value. It may even be ongoing, but it was a large number. And that, you know, people don't understand that's hurting the taxpayers of Florida, of Vermont.
So use that False Claims Act that we can thank Senator Grassley for. It's cold out there in Vermont. We need vigorous enforcement to protect taxpayers and Vermonters from ripoff charges. Thank you. I yield.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's good to see you.
Thank you.
And I meant every.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want the coach to be upset, but when you ask the question, how did you both get here? I kind of get it, how you got here. I'm still trying to figure out about the coach.
How Coach got here?
But you did another thing that really is astonishing. Senator Cruz gave you a very nice introduction. And he, you know, I didn't know something that he's kept on the down low. He actually has a sense of humor. So this is a pretty astonishing hearing.
It's a new day.
It is. And thank you for your visit to my office and your enthusiasm about rural America. And I'm so delighted to be working with our new ranking member and our new chair to try to strengthen rural America. And I share the, I think, point of view strongly held by members of this committee that rural America really is about the great values and strength of America, hard work, family, community. And rural America has been under brutal pressure. And I think every single one of us wants to do everything we can to strengthen it, because a strong rural America is a strong America. A couple of things. We have been really blessed in Vermont with a very responsive Department of Agriculture. The Rural Development Organization in Vermont has helped us through the floods of July 23 and July 24. It has used opportunities to strengthen the economy for farmers. So I just want to make certain that some of the things that have really been helpful to us, we can have some confidence will continue should you be the new Secretary of Agriculture. Number one, we've got, under the previous administration, there was $40 million that went to Vermont for energy efficiency programs. And we don't have to have a debate about climate change and whether it's real or not, but my view is this: agriculture and our farmers can help us deal with the weather events that are enormous by doing things where they get income to sequester carbon. So without having the climate change discussion, I want to make certain that I can have some confidence that our farmers who are adopting regenerative agricultural practices, organic agriculture, are doing things that by all estimations make for good, healthy crops, but also reduce carbon emissions, that will continue to make that possible, and they'll get paid to do it, not just be asked through regulations to bear the burden.
Senator Welch, thank you, and love visiting with you, and excited to come to Vermont if invited. I loved our conversation, and we actually talked about the workforce at USDA, at least those that you have interacted with and worked with, and hearing from you how excellent the service was and the good job that they did meant a lot to me, and I look forward to learning more and meeting them if confirmed. I think it's important to recognize, Senator, I will always have an open dialogue with all of you. I think I gave all of you my cell phone.
No, you did.
Let
me go on to the next one, because I just want to
Sure.
go through a few things. Another issue is labor on the farm. We can't milk our cows. We literally can't milk our cows without immigrant labor. And I'm for a secure border. I think all of us here are, but I'm also for legal immigration. And that is a real challenge for our dairy farmers. And I want to make sure that whatever we do to secure the border doesn't deprive our hardworking dairy farms and farmers access to the labor that they absolutely depend on. Can you comment on that?
Senator, yes, thank you. And I appreciate everyone's commitment to a secure border. You are not the only one on this side of the room that has made the point that that's really important. But I know there is great concern amongst our ag community on what immigration under President Trump will look like. My commitment to you is this, that understanding the data and understanding the impact of those in the ag community, dairy farms, I think especially are concerned, but everybody is, ensuring that we're working with the nominee over at Labor, Lori Chavez-Duremer, who is from Oregon.
So we will work together on that.
Yes, sir.
And you appreciate the importance of having access to that labor for our dairy farms and others as well.
I know that these cows need to be milked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't go away. If there's no one to milk them, that's big trouble.
All right. Another thing, a shared view that a lot of the incredible challenges farmers have are because they don't control the weather. And a lot of our small farmers, our vegetable farmers, they don't have an insurance program that works for them. The insurance program for some of our vegetable folks, they would only get paid wholesale or reimbursed wholesale when they sell at farmers markets at retail. And also they would have this incredible documentation process there where they had to say how many tomatoes they had, how many beets they had. I've introduced the Weather Act as an effort to try to streamline the reporting requirements, and I'm not going to ask you for the details on that, but we have to have insurance programs that help not just the big commodities, which is a challenge and an obligation we have, but the smaller farmers that are the future. Can I count on working with you on that?
Well, streamline, the word streamline is my love language. So yes, you and I will absolutely work together on that. And we've spent a lot of time this morning talking to everyone about restoring rural America and how important that is to the next 250 years of our country. That will happen because of our small family farms and our rural ranchers.
You know, and another issue for young farmers, it's so hard for a young person to get into farming,
Yes,
largely
sir.
because they can't get the farmland. And there's a lot of concern expressed here, and I share it, about Chinese possibly buying up. But you know who's buying it up? It's private equity. I want farmers to be able to buy up farmland. I mean, is that of concern to you? I know having access to farmland for young farmers is, but China may be a threat, but private equity is a threat too. Care to comment?
Sir, thank you. The average farmer today, the average age is 58 years old. If we really think we're going to have a sustainable, thriving ag community in 20 or 30 or 50 years after you and I are probably have gone to meet our maker, then we have to reverse that trend.
Okay, and the last topic in this round, rural broadband.
Yes,
it
sir.
has made such a difference for rural Vermont and for our farm communities. And your department has played a major role in facilitating that. We have to continue that and get that last barn on the longest dirt road wired so they have the advantages that come with access to the internet. Care to comment?
100% agree.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Senator.
it.
Thank you.
Senator Justice.
Pam Bondi is qualified. She has done outstanding work as an attorney general, both as a county prosecutor and as a Florida attorney general. And I actually quite admire the grit that she had to take on a statewide campaign to become attorney general. Number two, she had very good testimony from Republicans and Democrats about her managerial style. And when I met with her, she was very engaging and responsive to the concerns I have about criminal justice. She's qualified. The question that we face as a Senate is what kind of Department of Justice will we have? There has been a bipartisan recognition of the importance of independence at the Department of Justice. So will we have a Department of Justice that is independent, or will we have a Department of Justice that, in the words of President Trump, is my Department of Justice, where I have the right to do anything I want to do? There's no question about where President Trump is going. 9 days into the president's administration, he is on a rampage of reckless conduct and illegal conduct. The reckless conduct, of course, are these horrible pardons. People who grabbed the shields that police were using to defend themselves and then started battering police with them, stomping them, kicking them, spitting on them. And then these folks who were pardoned, they get out and they say they want to come back here and they want those who certified the election of the president to be hanged. We have people who were pardoned who were wanted for soliciting sex with a minor. Those pardons are so disrespectful to the men and women of law enforcement. It is absolutely despicable, in my view. But then the illegal conduct. The president says that he can do what he wants to do regardless of the law. One of the laws that I'm so proud of is something, Mr. Chairman, you authored, and it's the Inspector Generals. And he fired them all, despite the specific provision in that law that you wisely included, that there be 30-day notice. Illegal, clearly illegal. He did the same thing at the National Labor Relations Board. There's specific statutory legislative responsibility if you want to remove a person. Just blew by it. Illegal. And then, of course, the shocking announcement about impoundment. Absolutely illegal, interfering with the constitutional right of the Article I branch of Congress to be the appropriator of funds. And what he is doing is illegal. And then TikTok, we passed a law in Congress, bipartisan, that it has to comply or be sold. The president picks and chooses and says, no, we're not applying that law. Illegal. And then at the Justice Department, before the new AG is even there, the president has installed his personal lawyers. And they started doing dirty work, firing career prosecutors. So there's no mystery here about what the president is going to insist upon. It's that the DOJ be my law firm. That's what it is. And there's no question, because if past is prologue, goodbye to Attorney General Barr, goodbye to Attorney General Sessions when they didn't comply with the demands of an overbearing president. Now, I would like to think that Pam Bondi would have the ability to stand up because she is qualified, she's engaging, but I was very disturbed on the question from Senator Hirono, who won the election, and she couldn't answer it. It was the Trump permissible answer that President Biden is the president, but could not say that he won the election. That bodes poorly. So, Mr. President, or pardon me, Mr. Chairman, that's the reason for my no vote. But this raises a question I think that we as the United States Senate have to ask ourselves in view of the 9 days of the reckless conduct and the illegal conduct of the president. Will we fulfill our constitutional role as a separate and independent branch of government to maintain the principle of separation of powers and checks and balances? Our founders knew that would be needed. What they didn't know is whether those who served in this position as United States senators would meet the challenge when the check and balance was needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to begin by thanking you.
Thank you very much. Just responding, you guys won. There was, if you want to call it a jury box, the American people elected you. And you're the majority party in the House and in the Senate. You've got President Trump was duly elected. But let me tell you, the source of my ongoing concern, which I regret, it sometimes does not seem to be a common concern. We had a catastrophe for our democracy on January 6th. And you're asserting that you won, and you did, and I acknowledge it. It troubles me that so many people have difficulty saying Biden won the election. And I listened to your response, Mr. Patel, and many of the people who congratulated you and your parents on your extraordinary story. I share that, so I want you to know that. But what's so hard about just saying that Biden won the 2020 election? What's hard about that?
Senator, as I've said before, that President Biden was certified and sworn in, and he was the president. I don't know how else to say it.
Well, the other way to say it is he won.
He was the president.
The other way to say it is he won. I can say Trump won. I didn't vote for him, but he won. You know, Al Gore said Bush won when they were having that recount in Florida. And we have had a peaceful transfer of power here in very contested elections. And I'll just be very direct with you about why I think this is of consequence. When Donald Trump has never acknowledged that he lost in 2020. And he invited people to come to the Capitol on January 6th to stop the steal. And after that happened, police officers died. People were injured. It created enormous ongoing bitterness within the country. And that's your boss. Do you believe that the 2020 election was stolen, as President Trump says it is?
Sir, my opinions on the 2020 election have been expressed in this hearing, and he's entitled to whatever opinions he wants.
Do you agree with him that the election was stolen in 2020?
Senator, millions of Americans have expressed concern going back to multiple elections over election integrity.
You know, you're so skillful. You understand what I'm asking you. Can you say the words, Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
Joe Biden was the president of the United States.
You understand this. There's a difference. I can say the words, Donald Trump won. I don't like to say it, but I must say it. And you cannot say that Joe Biden won the election.
What I can say is the same for both of them, Senator. Both of their elections were certified, and they are both, one was and one now is president.
Okay. The reason I have some concerns about that, my colleagues on the Republican side, is that whoever is the FBI director, and I suspect it will be Mr. Patel, has a boss. And he has strong points of view. He's said Vice President Harris was a criminal and should be prosecuted. Is that a prosecution you would initiate?
There is no prosecution or that the FBI will ever initiate, because the FBI will only do investigations, and those will only be open where there's a factual and constitutional basis to do so.
Your boss has said that General Milley, who served us with great distinction, I happen to have great admiration for, should be tried for treason. Do you agree with that?
Senator, everybody's entitled to their opinion. The only thing that matters at the FBI is whether the law is followed.
Okay, I know everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm asking you your opinion. Should General Milley be tried for treason?
Vice President Harris, Kamala Harris, or General Milley or anyone otherwise will not be subjected to an FBI investigation that doesn't meet the rigorous standards of the Constitution.
You've talked about your devotion to the men and women in the FBI. I accept that. But as you know, President Trump used the power of the pardon to let people who are cop beaters out of jail, right? He also let a drug dealer out of jail. You're familiar with Ross, or maybe you're not. Ross Ulbricht started the Silk Road, the dark web. He made millions of dollars selling drugs, providing a vehicle by which people could get things that were going to kill him, and people died. He also sought a couple of people to murder on his behalf because he thought his empire was threatened. What is your opinion about Trump pardoning this drug dealer, attempted murderer?
My opinion on presidential pardons is that, one, I was not consulted in
No.
the FBI.
I'm asking you your opinion about Mr.
Right.
Holbrook. Should the person who created that dark web drug dealer situation, should he be pardoned in your opinion?
Senator, it's not appropriate for me to speak on pardons, but I've spoken out against pardons against cop killers and those who do violence to law enforcement, whether it's President Biden or Trump.
I'm with you on that. Okay, I'm with the chairman over here, but I'm just trying to find out on Holbrook. You're gonna, again, bottom line here, you're gonna have a tough job, and you're gonna have a tough boss, because he gets it in his mind he wants to do something, nothing gets in the way, and there's gonna become a time when an FBI director or an attorney general has to make a decision about the Constitution and what's being requested, and can that person at that time, when the important values of the Constitution are at stake, say no to a person who is insisting you take an action?
And Senator, that's why I think it's time, for the first time in this country's history, that a public defender be the next director of the FBI, because no one knows more about constitutional due process than PDs.
Well, you're appealing to mutual pride here with the public defender, but you know what? I still understand you didn't answer the question. That's the public defender in me, okay? Look, and I say this to my colleagues, we cannot have a weaponized Justice Department or FBI. And what's weaponized is in the eye of the beholder, like the prosecutions of President Trump, and I get that. We cannot have it. But what I think we all have to acknowledge when we've got a president who's basically saying a political enemy, whether it's Harris, whether it's Liz Cheney, whether it's Adam Schiff, should be prosecuted, that's doing damage to the mutual goal we have of not weaponizing a department. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I don't want to belabor this, but it certainly would be of benefit to us if that grand jury testimony could be released. But my understanding is the Senator Whitehouse testimony point that you don't need, you as a witness could reveal what you said, and I'm just suggesting you might give that some further thought. The second thing is that you have everybody who runs an agency has enormous responsibility for the people who work there. I happen to have an incredibly high opinion of the FBI. The first time I came to Washington as a boy, I remember the thrill I had going to the FBI headquarters. I thought it was a big deal that my senator then got me special tickets to go, and I've always admired them. There's a lot of apprehension there, and it's not just on this question of weaponization. There's a lot of disruption in a new administration, and if you've seen, the president announced an impoundment in effect. It's been rescinded by the courts, but we've received calls from folks in various agencies who we've worked with or seen over the years, and there's just an immense amount of insecurity. Do I have my job? Don't I have my job? And frankly, I think this is my point to the president. Chaos is one thing, but cruelty is another. And having people be really uncertain about do they have a job today or not and leaving them in limbo, I don't think is a good thing for morale, and I don't care whether it's a Democratic or Republican president. I'm just looking to you to assure me that the tradition that we've had anchored in the FBI since 1972, when it was politicized. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover went after Martin Luther King in a disgusting and despicable way. He went after some John Birch Society folks for their political beliefs in a disgusting and horrible way. And we have no political appointees over there. So it's going to be up to you to, I think, strengthen that tradition. And we heard about the political appointees who are over there now, or I guess they're not officially appointees, but they've been sent by the administration. You didn't know about it. But one of them is from SpaceX. And, Elon Musk He's a rich guy. But he has no authority other than what's delegated by the president. But he has no official authority. And why is it, you can't answer this, but do you want somebody like Elon Musk peering over your shoulder, telling you what to do about personnel?
No, the FBI must be independent.
Go kick him out. I mean, I'm with you on that. He has no basis. He has no reason to be there. There's some former FBI people. You'll pick the people that you want to listen to. You'll have to make the decisions. You'll be accountable to this committee. But no on Elon Musk. He's just a political crony who knows nothing about law enforcement. So thank you for that assurance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of the nominees, and I'll start, Ms. Slater, with you, and then speak with you, Mr. Blanch, if that's okay. Ms. Slater, first of all, Julie Brill, who is a great Vermonter, was a FTC commissioner, thinks you're great. I think Julie Brill is great, so you've got something going for you, okay? Inflation is just a wicked challenge for everyday Vermonters trying to pay their bills. And it popped again today, twice as high as last month. My view is that the role that you would play would have a major impact on whether we can deal with the market consolidation that is allowing entities to have enormous amount of pricing power and abusing that pricing power at the expense of folks that all of us represent. So I just want to ask you a few questions about that. Healthcare, incredibly expensive. Private equity is now getting in healthcare, not to deliver services, but to monetize the profit, take it for shareholders and not reinvest it in the healthcare system. I'm going to give an example. Stewart Healthcare in Massachusetts. It's a Catholic health care system with 6 hospitals. Private equity purchased Stewart in 2010. It was they bought it for the real estate, and they ran it into the ground. It goes out of business, and moms who thought they had an appointment to take care of their sick child suddenly found out the hospital's closed. And those guys got out of town. Stewart just wrecked it. That's my view. What's the role of private equity in healthcare when they don't reinvest? They just squeeze and turn it into a real estate play and then leave high and dry a lot of folks in rural areas who want to get healthcare.
Thanks, Senator. I agree with you that healthcare markets are crucial markets for an antitrust standpoint. And I do commit to keeping a close eye to the extent that the DOJ has jurisdiction.
Please do that. We've got to have the healthcare system be about healthcare, not enriching Wall Street, all right? Ag, that's a big deal for us in Vermont. We got farmers. They love nothing more than working the land to try to feed Vermonters and feed Americans. Incredible consolidation. 6 grocery store chains have 65%, 83% of milk sales with 3 companies. Poultry at 60%. For beef, it's between 80 and 85%. Do you see the consolidation in the agriculture industry and the food processing industry as something that is a factor in increasing prices so that people have sticker shock when they check out at the grocery line?
Well, there are many variables that go into pricing, but competition or lack of competition is certainly one of them.
All right, so you'll stay on that. I appreciate that. Mr. Blanch, look, you're a qualified guy. I am amazed at your story. You started out with nothing. You didn't go to the Ivy League schools, and you ended up with this extraordinary career at major law firms who, in years past, would have never looked at a guy like you, and I know your wife helped you a lot, so there's so much to admire. And by the way, I was a public defender. I defended bad people. I got assigned to those cases, and I assume that you respect the fact that I took the assignment.
Absolutely.
It would never hold it against a public defender that they were defending in the court of law a person who was accused of a serious crime, right?
I would not.
Right. And my view on the FBI is it's the same thing. I support the FBI. I so admire those folks, the men and women. And if an FBI agent, I'm a worker there, and I get assigned to a case by my boss, is there any reason in the world that I should pay a price because I did my job as assigned?
No, and I don't
Right.
think that that's what's happening. I'm not there. I see the same memos,
No,
read the same articles, but I don't think that that's what's happening.
I know you weren't there, but let me just ask you, we have got to stand up for those folks. And you're going to have a major job. And my hope, I don't want to get in an argument, I respect you a lot, but my hope is you're going to defend the men and women at the FBI who just did their job.
The men and women of the FBI that just did their job, of course, absolutely.
All right, and getting assigned to a case is one. Another thing, you were in the Southern District. You know, I was a young lawyer, and I remember looking around for jobs. I worked for, I noticed some of the places you worked, kind of fancy. But there's nothing better than the Southern District, right? That's the crown jewel of the federal prosecution, right? And hasn't it been the tradition in the Southern District, and actually in the whole U.S. attorney system, that there's independence in those local offices? You know, there's a chain of command, but there's a lot of independence, correct?
Well, I agree with what you said. There's a chain of command and there is independence, yes.
All right. So what I just saw with the dismissal of the Adams charge, that was directed by D.C., correct? This is Mayor Adams.
I have the same information you have. It appears it was, yes.
That's right.
I don't know, beyond what I've publicly
this
reported.
is the concern that all of us have. We're hearing from our colleagues about weaponization, and we heard from you in the experience you had with President Trump. On our side, it's like an effort to erase something that really happened. That was January 6th. And the apprehension that a lot of us have is that the issue here of lawfare and weaponization is just still continuing, where you have the president saying, my Justice Department, and he's telling, basically through his agents, telling, let's dismiss the corruption charge against the mayor of New York City. So I just want to put that out there to let you know there's good faith concern here on both sides about this use of the term weaponization and the use of the term lawfare. And I don't know if I have time, Mr. Chairman, for one other question. Mr. Chairman, I just didn't know if I had time for one more question. I just wanted to ask Mr. Blanche, when he goes on that triathlon, I guess you went with you and your father-in-law?
No, my daddy's right there.
Your father? All right.
It was a full Ironman, Senator.
All right. The next time you go, the only person up on the dais who can join you is Senator Grassley. I yield back.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that this country and this Congress is in the midst of what has been a slow-moving but rapidly accelerating constitutional crisis. It began most visibly on January 6th of 2021, when the two norms of this republic, the peaceful transfer of power and the renunciation of violence, were breached. And where many members of the House and Senate voted against certifying the election of the person chosen by the American people. President Trump then, and President Trump today, continues to assert that the 2020 election was stolen. Stop the steal. He won the 2024 election. His election was certified. He's entitled, as president, to vigorously use the powers of the presidency to implement the policies that he advocates. He's not entitled to violate the Constitution in his effort to do so. Mr. Chairman, in my view, the beginning of the Trump administration is showing a contempt for the Constitution and a lawlessness that is dangerous to the future of our republic. freezing federal spending, clearly unconstitutional, shutting down agencies created by Congress with no authority to do so, removing leaders of agencies, including inspector generals, against the clear requirements of law, firing government employees who have civil service protections, threatening to deport people based on their political views, revoking by executive authority birthright citizenship. These are just some of the actions that the president has taken where he has no authority to do so. On Monday, a federal judge said that the White House defied his order to release billions of dollars in federal grants, marking the first time a judge has expressly declared that the Trump administration is disobeying a judicial mandate. This country is headed into a situation where, in addition to acting without authority, the president is indicating he will defy rulings from the third branch of our government, the judiciary. Vice President Vance has made very clear his point of view on this. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate powers. Of course, under our Constitution, since Marbury versus Madison, the court is the final arbiter of what is constitutional or what is not. My colleagues, my view of this is that the administration is showing maximum contempt for core constitutional values, including, most importantly, the separation of powers. We have a dilemma here. There are many in this committee that are fully in support of the policies that President Trump is pursuing. That's, of course, your right and his right. But the unique responsibility each of us as a United States Senator has is to guarantee that in pursuit of those policies, it is done within the constitutional boundaries. This is not just to talk about civic aspiration. It's a recognition that the separation of powers, that the system of checks and balances, that the concept that ambition in the executive should be matched with ambition in the legislature, has held this country together for 250 years. We have fierce debates about important public policy matters. But what allows us to resolve those, despite disagreements, intense disagreements, is the pushing and the shoving, the engagement, the winning and moving forward, losing a fight and falling back, but all within the norms of the Constitution. That's being threatened, and I don't say that lightly. But what has happened on January 6th is continuing. And where we saw the Stop the Steal, the renunciation of the decision that the American people made on 2020 in that election, and the candidates, many of them who came before us, including Mr. Patel, unable to simply say who won the 2020 election, continuing the Stop the Steal narrative. And then with President Trump, in his first weeks in office, acting in ways that challenge the constitutional order. I'm voting against Mr. Patel because he is clearly an instrument in that effort to continue eroding the precepts of the Constitution on the separation of powers. My colleagues, this is a very difficult time, particularly for my colleagues on the Republican side. You support many of the President Trump's policies, and as I say, that's your right. But it is so essential to each of us as a U.S. Senator to make our own judgments about whether the manner in which power is being used on the executive branch is a threat to the power of the legislative branch, the Article I branch. We, each of us, must be custodians of that constitutional order in our role as the legislature in it. Tough judgments that have to be made. My judgment is that the president is showing absolute contempt for the United States Congress. And the next stop is contempt for the United States judiciary. I cannot vote for a person who signed on to that agenda. I yield the floor.
Davis, and without objection, these are all entered into the record. And Senator Welch, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rice, it was very nice to visit with you yesterday, and it's nice to see your kids. You promised they were going to be here and your wife, a couple of your kids. That's great. All of us are kind of amazed you're the cheerful person you are, having survived working for this guy named Cruz from Texas. I'll tell you, it's hard on us, but we can imagine what it's like for the chief of staff. You know, this is
Your time has expired.
You know, to all of you, let me express what is a concern I think many of us have. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing, but there's a profoundly new set of expectations and boundaries in what the executive power is now. We've had decisions by the Supreme Court that gives immunity to the president. I find that shocking. I think a president has to be subject to the law, not above the law. We also have a president who's been very explicit in determined his insistence that it's, quote, my Justice Department. And has also made the statement that if he does it to save the country, it's lawful. That's unique, that we haven't had that point of view embedded, and to some extent, there's some validation with what the Supreme Court is doing and also what the president is asserting. That causes me great concern because I think it really threatens the separation of powers and the co-equal authority of Congress to be a check and balance. And all of you will have major positions that will require you basically to serve the interests of the president. And we all understand that, but where there's a real redefinition of that presidential authority. So I want to ask a little bit about that. I'll ask you, Mr. Rice, you know, I know your tweet was, you were asked about that, can the president basically violate the law? Just tell me where you come from in terms of what the limits are on presidential authority.
Well, thank you, and it was really a pleasure visiting with you and your staff just yesterday. Senator, if I could just clarify, you referenced a tweet in which I said the president has unlimited power?
I'll get to the tweet. I thought Senator Durbin had displayed it. I was told that. You got it? Looking for some Andrew Jackson level leadership on this one. Judge Yackel has made his decision, now let him enforce it. So it's the famous Jackson dictum that we can essentially disregard the decision of a Supreme Court.
Thank you for that, and thank you for clarifying, Senator Welch. So my position reflects a fairly mainstream view within right of center jurisprudential circles, which is simply to suggest that various Supreme Court or Court of Appeals decisions are more limited in scope than maybe our friends who share a different jurisprudential view of Supreme Court holding would suggest.
Well, let's say there is a Supreme Court holding saying that a presidential policy is invalid. You know, but President Trump has said he can do basically anything if it's to save the country. All right, that's his motivation. And that anything would include disregarding the order of the court if in the judgment of the president, his disregarding that order was to save the country.
So, Senator, first, I think I'm not aware of any instance in which President Trump genuinely stated that he can do anything to save the country.
Mr. Sauer, well, I'm asking that maybe it's a hypothetical, but I actually don't think this is a hypothetical in that it hasn't happened yet, but it's a hypothetical based on very explicit decisions, one by the Supreme Court on immunity, another by President Trump's own statements. Mr. Sauer, do you believe the president has the authority in the name of saving the country to disregard a decision by the Supreme Court?
To be clear, I think as I stated earlier, Senator, I have had the privilege of representing President Trump for much of the last 2 years.
I'm not asking that. You know what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm not asking about the privilege you had of serving the president. I'm asking the question. You heard my question. Can the president disregard the order because in his opinion, he's acting in a way that will, quote, save the country?
I think the answer that I was trying to give respectfully is that I've represented President Trump for 2 years, and I've never seen anything that would lead me to believe that I'd be put in any situation.
You know what? I get it. You respect him. You like him. He was your lawyer. But I'm not asking about that. I give you that, right? But the president has now asserted that he has the right basically to do what he thinks is necessary to save the country. And I'm asking whether that includes violating a Supreme Court order.
I think I would just refer back to the answers I gave earlier to similar questions from the ranking member.
Well, how about answering my question now that I'm here?
Well, there was a lengthy exchange about that, but again, I've represented President Trump for 2 years. I've never been put in any situation like that, and I don't anticipate being so.
I just got to say, Mr. Chairman, that's a little bit frustrating. I understand that he has a good relationship with the president, respects him, all right, and the president has never put him in that position. But we're in a new situation here. The president is now the president. He's made these statements. There is a real question in emerging unitary executive authority. This is a very serious question that we've never had to face before. Can the president disregard a decision by the Supreme Court? And, you know, I'll yield back, but I want to just express my frustration at not getting a direct answer on what I think is an existential question for this country.
Well, I will note the witnesses did point out that President Trump has been president for 4 years and 1 month now, and he has never disregarded a court order. And we just finished 4 years of Joe Biden routinely disregarding the law, in no instance more flagrantly than concerning our southern border, where he defied federal immigration law and allowed 12 million illegal immigrants to come into this country. And so the hypotheticals that are being posed by our Democrat colleagues, sadly, we have lived in the last 4 years when you have a lawless president who does not follow the statutes passed by Congress and signed into the United States Code. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The credentials of each of you are impressive.
On China, targeted tariffs make some sense. What is being rolled out and the way this is being done is so destructive and so reckless and so irresponsible that it's creating nothing but economic chaos, uncertainty, and suffering for a lot of people. These are really disastrous for Vermont. I just want to go through this question of how do these roll out? You did not set, as our trade representative, the tariff rates on all of these countries that were on display when the president announced them, right?
Senator, the president made a decision on how he wanted to have the tariff set, and the economic cabinet advised him on that.
Right, but you did not set like the 50% rate on Lesotho.
I personally didn't, no.
Yeah, can you explain how that makes any sense?
So the way that the methodology works is the emergency we're talking about is premised on the trade deficit, which we think is well, I'm trying to explain the methodology, Senator, if you want to hear it.
This has got to get concrete, because this has real impacts on everyday people. So the rhetoric about what the goals are when the rollout is so in conflict with achieving anything other than economic downturn. How did the 50% rate on Lesotho be decided?
So when you have White House economists who assess the trade deficit.
But you had no role in it?
Well, I certainly had a role in it. Everyone was advising the president on how to do this.
Tell me why I came up with 50% for Lesotho.
Well, I'd like to tell you, Senator. So when you look at a country's trade deficit, we believe that captures some of the unfairnesses, and you have to have a uniform methodology. You can't be arbitrary or capricious.
I'm going to keep going, because Lesotho does diamonds, and
I'm happy to talk more to you about the methodology.
There is, I mean, my sense is there is no methodology. I asked ChatGPT, and basically they came up with some formula.
Well, that's not true.
Well, here's how it looks. Donald Trump just got fed up and said, what the heck, we'll just go with this formula that makes no sense. Number two, the issue of these tariffs. Now, the phone is ringing off the hook at the White House from countries wanting to get a break, right?
They want to talk about how to have reciprocal trade with us and how to get that deficit down.
That's right. So here's the structural issue that is really alarming to me, and I hope to all of us. We are using these tariffs, or the president is using these tariffs, from going from an economy that's based on competition to one that's based on access. You know, in a competitive economy, your product, your service determines the outcome and how well you do. In an access economy, it's who's got Donald Trump's number, who's got your number, who's got Lutnick's number, and you call up and you get a break. That's an access economy. Is this going to be the arbitrary authority of the president to decide, yes, we'll cut the Vietnam tariff, and no, we'll sustain the tariff on Lesotho?
The way this works, Senator, is we have longstanding relationships with trade officials in these foreign countries, and they work with our staff, our career staff, and they develop, if someone comes to us with an offer, we review it, we analyze it, and we present it to the president.
They're calling the president. I mean, you've got Donald Trump as president basically picking and choosing winners and losers, and who knows on what basis. That's not a trade regime that anybody can count on. That's something they can game if they know you, they know Lutnick, they know Donald Trump. You know, that I think was what Senator Warnock was asking about. We've got farmers on the border with Canada. They get their grain. It's going to be 25% hit. We've got consumers whose electricity bills are going up because of retaliation from Canada. Can they make a call to you, to Howard Lutnick, to the president, and ask for relief?
Well, we certainly talk to all kinds of constituents. We talk to labor unions, we talk to civil society, we talk to business. I would say with Canada and Mexico, they receive duty-free treatment for things that follow the rules of USMCA. If they bring in Chinese content and send it down, they won't get a break.
Let me tell you the frustration I have. There is a place for targeted tariffs to help us and also to push back on unfair trade practices. I support that. That's not what this is. This is utter chaos, arbitrary and willful on the part of the president that is setting up a dynamic where he picks winners and losers rather than companies compete to do the best they can and have the benefit of good work and a good product. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Barrasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From Vermont.
Mr. President, all of us are extremely concerned, and I mean all of us, Senator Risch and all the Republican colleagues and me and all of the Democratic colleagues about the suffering and famine that's upon the folks in Gaza. And today I'm here to offer a resolution for consideration on which 46 senators on our side agree. And although we've not had signatories on the Republican side, I know that my colleagues on the Republican side are very concerned about the devastating absence of food and medicine and baby formula for 2 million Palestinians that are living in Gaza. It's been 74 days Mr. President, since aid trucks were allowed to transit into Gaza. That's a decision that the Israeli government has made under Prime Minister Netanyahu. And what does alarm me is that it's very clear under international law, it's very clear on prior actions that this United States Senate has taken, that in a conflict, as a tactic of war, starving the civilian population is illegal, impermissible, and just wrong, absolutely wrong. And as an indication of the suffering, this is a young child who died in her parents' arms, Janine Ishkafi. And that was due to no food, no baby formula to feed this young person. And the UN has released a report that indicates if food is not brought into Gaza, within the next 48 hours, 14,000 more infants will die. And they will die in the arms of their mother or father. So this question of should aid get in, obviously it should. It's not right for aid to be withheld as an instrument of war. And regrettably, that appears to have been a decision that has been made by the Israeli government. It's not right, it's not necessary, it's not helpful, and it is extraordinarily harmful to innocent children, to innocent mothers. So my hope is that this Senate would pass a resolution making it very clear about our concern about the well-being of innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and that food that those Palestinians in Gaza need is right on the other side of the border. It's there. All it needs is to be transported from where it is into Gaza and then distributed. You know, I want to just quote a Palestinian about how dire that situation is. The words of a Palestinian, let me quote, "Believe it or not," and this is, by the way, at a moment when bombs are still dropping, where people who've been relocated a dozen times are having to relocate again, where the 2 remaining hospitals in Han Yunis have been bombed, where there's no security whatsoever. This is what the Palestinian said that sums it up. Believe it or not, people no longer care about bombs, rockets, or even death. What consumes them now is food, how to find it, how to feed their children. It is impossible to describe how hard life has become. People walk around in a daze, dizzy from malnutrition and despair. People are confused, anxious, and exhausted. They are literally dying of hunger. At this point, they would accept anything just to survive. People are fainting in the streets. They look like skin and bones, pale and dizzy. If you saw them, you would break down and cry. That's the word of a Palestinian in Gaza. Mr. President, we've got to feed those people. The food is there. We all want those innocent people to survive and avoid famine. Let us do every single thing we can to persuade the Israeli Netanyahu government to get that food in to people who desperately need it. Mr. President, at this point, I want to yield to my colleague, Senator Van Hollen from Maryland.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Senator from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for offering this resolution. And I just want to focus on the resolution itself for a moment, because you would think this is something that we could all agree on. I'm just reading the resolved clause here. Resolved that the Senate, Part 1, is gravely concerned with A, the humanitarian crisis and acute suffering of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and B, the suffering of the hostages and hostage families. So that's section 1 of the resolve clause. As Senator Welch has said, I think we all acknowledge the terrible humanitarian disaster that Palestinian civilians are suffering under right now. President Trump just acknowledged it the other day. He said a lot of people are starving. Cindy McCain said, and I quote, "Families in Gaza are starving while the food they need is sitting at the border." 57 children have already died from malnutrition, and the reports are that 14,000 Palestinian children in Gaza are at imminent risk of death if they don't get more food. Now, just yesterday, after 78 days of a total siege and blockade on any food coming in to Gaza, a trickle of food began to get in, primarily because European countries began to say very loudly that what was happening was unacceptable, that it was a violation of international law. We're also hearing from the hostage families the urgency of putting an end to this conflict and resolving this to make sure their loved ones can come home. I was very glad to see Steve Witkoff be able to bring home Edan Alexander. Now we have to bring back the rest of the hostages, and the hostage families overwhelmingly have been calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government to end the conflict, end the suffering on all sides, and bring their loved ones home. Now I want to just read the second part of this resolution because it does what I understand so many of the hostages' families have been saying that we should do. It calls on the White House, the Department of State, and other relevant United States government agencies to urgently use all available diplomatic tools to bring about the release of the hostages, an immediate cessation of the blockade on food and humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians, and a durable end to the conflict in Gaza. That's part 1 and part 2 of the resolve clause that I just read. And I want to thank Senator Welch because he has written this in a way that you would think not a single senator could object to the words in this resolution. And so I do urge my colleagues to support it. Let's put an end to the suffering and starvation of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Let's get the hostages home, and let's work to end this conflict in a way that ensures no more October 7ths and ensures security and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians alike. I yield back to the senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen.
Senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you again, Senator from Maryland. Mr. President, notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration and the Senate now proceed to Senate Res. 224. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Action.
President.
Senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. First of all, we have no disagreement with the suffering that's going on in Gaza. The problem we have here is, as we heard from both of these speakers, not one word was said as to whose fault this is. This is the fault of a group of people. And that group of people is Hamas. I heard them mention Israel several times. This is not Israel's fault. I heard them mention us, the United States. This is not our fault. I couldn't agree more with Senator Welch when he talks about the fact that we want an immediate ceasefire and for people to be fed there and things to get better there. It is so simple. It is so easy. It is totally in the hands of Hamas. If they release the hostages, they lay down their arms, and they surrender, not one more bullet will be fired, and there will be scads of trucks come into Gaza. That's how this ends. But can we end it? No. If we send trucks in, Senator, you know, you've seen the intelligence on this. When we send trucks of food in there, who eats? The soldiers eat. The Hamas soldiers eat. They starve the women and they starve the children. Not only do they starve them, they use them as human shields. And they set up their facilities, their military facilities, in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in all kinds of places that they then wring their hands and say, oh my gosh, we've been attacked. Look, this is despicable. This is horrible. This is criminal. It's beyond human understanding how human beings could treat other human beings the same way, especially when you're related to them as they are in Palestine. So I agree that this needs to stop. But the first thing that needs to be said is that this is the fault of Hamas, and it is not our fault. And it doesn't matter if we roll trucks in there tomorrow, that food would be taken, it would be stolen, it would be distributed by Hamas to their fighting soldiers, and the dying and the suffering of the women and children would continue. This thing is badly aimed. It does not in any way lay the fault where it belongs, and that is at the feet of Hamas. So based on all that, I share your objective. This gets us nowhere, and worse than that, it doesn't point out where the problem is. Madam President, I object.
Objections heard.
Madam President.
Senator from Vermont.
I want the senator from Idaho, the esteemed chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, to know that when it comes to condemning Hamas for what it did on October 7th, for what it's done to the Palestinians in Gaza on an ongoing basis, I join you in condemning Hamas. And this resolution, Madam President, does not get into the question of fault. It gets into the question of suffering. It gets into the question of suffering of innocent people who at times have been victimized by Hamas, but whose families are hungry, who are starving. And the point of this resolution is to say, let's help them avoid starvation by supporting the delivery of the food and the medicine and the baby formula that they need. This in no way is going to solve the conflict. That's a point the senator made, and he's got a point to be made. But if we do all we can to facilitate the delivery of aid, it means that we're doing all we can to ease the suffering of innocent families who have been victimized. My view, Madam President, is that we should do all we can to alleviate the suffering, especially for these infants, these children, these women, and peace-loving Palestinians who want nothing more than to live in peace in their neighborhood. I yield back.
Senator from Idaho.
Madam President, I want to respond to that. First of all, I commend the senator for his appreciation for the suffering that's going on there. It is horrible. It's despicable. You've seen the photos. You've seen the video. It's a horrible, horrible situation. One of the difficulties I have with this is he is correct. This resolution does not assign fault, nor does it talk about fault. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with this. If this is going to be resolved, fault must be identified. The conditions on the ground has to be identified. And how this is going to be resolved has to be identified, none of which is considered in here. It is simply a suggestion that simply taking food there is going to resolve this problem. And we have done that. We have food there. It's ready to go in. As I said, 3 things need to happen, and it's in the hands solely of Hamas, not in Israel, not in Netanyahu, not in our president, not in the people of the United States' hands. It's in the hands of Hamas. And that is, if they simply release the hostages, lay down their arms and surrender, it's over. The food flows in. There's not another bullet fired. That's all that has to happen. But what has to be recognized in this is how this is going to end. There's only one way this can end, and that is with the complete and total destruction of Hamas. This is very similar to what the United States of America and its allies did in the late 1930s. We decided that the Nazis were so bad they could not exist as a military force, as a political force, or as a cultural force, and we decided they needed to be eliminated. That's what Israel has decided it has to do to protect itself. That's what it's doing. But Hamas can stop this, and they can stop it in a minute. And they're not showing any signs of that. And so what's going to happen is this thing's going to fight. This fight is going to go on until the last Hamas falls. Thank you.
I now recognize Ranking Member Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, the concrete issues of a universal injunction or forum shopping are things that we can address. But there is a context that we're all operating in, and this is where I disagree with my colleagues, particularly Senator Cruz and his recitation of what he saw as a judicial rampage. This moment we're in our country is testing whether the separation of powers, 3 co-equal branches of government, shall endure. That's really the question. We've seen an abdication of constitutional responsibility by the Congress. It's appalling. Ceding to a president the ability to impound funds, something that was declared unconstitutional in the Nixon Doctrine. Ceding to the president tariff authority, which in the Constitution belongs to the policymakers in Congress. Just 2 examples of Congress ceding its constitutional authority. That's done willingly by my colleagues in the House and some in the Senate. We should reassert our authority. But the second leg of that, the transfer of authority to the executive, is the rampant attack on the judiciary. And Senator Cruz gave some examples of what he thought was judicial overreach. Each one of those examples, as I see it, was the judges doing their job. They disagreed. And when they disagreed, it was asserted by the president and by the attorney general that they were monsters, they were renegades, they were out of control. It was an ad hominem attack because the judges were doing their jobs. And I will say we can deal with the forum shopping, which is something the private bar gets involved in. We can deal with universal injunctions. But the all-out assault on judges, because they make decisions, which is the job it is they have to do. And the decision is, has a president exceeded his authority? The decision is, has the Congress passed a law that deviates from constitutional requirements? Those are so profoundly important to keep that separation of powers and to keep the competition between the 3 branches so that we don't have absolute power vested in a single person, and that's the chief executive. So when, Senator Cruz, you talk about a judge making this decision about keeping somebody here, it's called due process. I'm for due process. When we talk about judges striking down under the international trade agreement, whether the president has authority to set these tariffs, and it's a 3-judge decision, one appointed by Trump, one appointed by Obama, one appointed by Reagan, and they say the president didn't have authority, I would say that is the judges doing their jobs. But what is most profoundly important for the well-being of our country is that the Congress reassert its authority to pass laws, to restrict the executive or to empower the executive, but not to cede our authority to the executive ever. And it's our responsibility to do every single thing we can to validate the legitimate exercise of the decision-making authority of the judiciary. I look forward to this hearing and the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I would make 2 brief observations. Number 1, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined, nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again, because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges, listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
Last week, President Trump sent to Congress a request to rescind $9.4 billion in fiscal year 2025 and 2024 funds that a majority of Republicans and Democrats had debated, had voted for, and those appropriations were signed into law by President Trump. And I want to briefly discuss the impact these rescissions would have because of the consequences for Americans, for our relationships with other governments, and for millions of people around the world. Also, I want to speak about what this does to the appropriations power and authority and responsibility of Congress. We're seeing, from my view, Mr. President, an abdication of Article I authority that belongs under the Constitution to Congress and delegating that to the chief executive. It is a violation of our separation of powers, which is a pillar of the checks and balances that is essential to the well-being of our democracy. First, talking about the rescissions. The White House, as it says with everything that we do appropriate money for, the White House claims it's waste, fraud, and abuse, and also claims that it contributes to the ballooning deficit. There's a contradiction here, because according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that the president is determined to pass, that will add $2.4 trillion to the deficit, $2.4 trillion. And that is before we add the increased debt service that will be required to pay it. In this country, taxpayers are now on the verge of paying $1 trillion annually in interest payments. And that is dead money. It doesn't support our military. It doesn't support our schools. It doesn't support scientific research. It's paid to bondholders, many of whom are in China. Most of the funds that the president is proposing to cancel were approved 2.5 months ago for fiscal year 2025. And there's been absolutely no showing that any of these funds, not a single dollar, cannot or should not be used for the purposes for which they were appropriated by a bipartisan majority in Congress. There has been absolutely no showing, none, of any waste, fraud, and abuse. These funds were deemed worthy of funding 2 months ago, and the President himself agreed. He signed it. This is an end around Article 1 authority of Congress. We pass a budget, and then the executive rescinds what it is we appropriated our funds for. Enormous erosion of the responsibility of Congress under Article 1. But let me just mention a few specific examples of the funds that are on the chopping block. Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's, in the case of Vermont, it's called Vermont Public, and it's our public radio station, and it's our public broadcasting. And every state has the public broadcasting system. Vermont, and I know we're not unique, it is essential programming that knits together our community, provided information that was crucial constantly when we had floods in July of 23 and July of 24. Federal funding is about 10% of our budget, but in many states it's about 40 or 50%. The administration is proposing to get rid of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting altogether. I totally and completely oppose that. It's the equivalent of $1.60 for each American annually, and it provides a source of local news at a time when we have news deserts all around the country, and the pressure on our local newspapers, on our local broadcasters, on our local radio stations is enormous. We need public broadcasting. I saw it in Vermont, as I mentioned, when we had the enormous benefit of the information we were needed desperately to deal with floods. My Republican colleagues in North Carolina had a similar experience. It was local public media markets and outlets that provided life-saving emergency alert information to ensure that victims knew which roads they could travel, which food distribution centers were open, and the elimination of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting puts all of this at risk. Another program set to be eliminated, PEPFAR. PEPFAR is a flagship HIV/AIDS prevention program. It was started by President George W. Bush. It has saved millions of lives. It has created enormous goodwill for the United States around the entire world. The chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee has strongly opposed any rescission of PEPFAR funds. And I agree with Senator Collins and cannot for the life of me understand how anyone would support rescinding those funds that provide so much to so many for so little. Some other programs. Global health, $500 million would be cut. These activities on global health protect child and maternal health. They combat HIV/AIDS and infectious diseases. We'd be rescinding funds that fight malaria, Ebola, polio, HIV, and AIDS, and other diseases that have been kept under control and out of the United States in many cases, thanks to these programs. They could easily explode into full-blown epidemics. $800 million is being cut for refugees, like those who are fleeing genocide in Darfur in Burma. It also, should we turn our back on the Afghan refugees, folks who served our men and women in uniform during the course of the Afghan war? Another cut is $83 million for programs that have supported democracy through organizations like the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, and Freedom House. These have all historically received bipartisan support and strong support. This rescission would put them out of business, even though we kept them in business on a bipartisan vote just 2.5 months ago. A cut of $1.65 billion for the Economic Support Fund. It may not necessarily be apparent on its face, but that fund account, it funds our economic assistance for Jordan, which has been an incredibly important ally to kind of release pressure in the Middle East, Egypt, Indonesia, Lebanon, and for other programs that combat corruption and transnational money laundering and terrorist financing, human trafficking and wildlife trafficking. These programs also, by the way, expand and build markets for U.S. exports, creating good, high-paying jobs in the United States of America. A cut of $460 million for assistance for Georgia, Armenia, Macedonia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, and other former Soviet republics. We want them to be our friend. We are in a contest with Russia. Walking away from these on-the-edge countries, fragile countries, would send the message Putin wants, even while he is seeking to overtake Ukraine. A cut of $496 million for international disaster assistance. And that, by the way, provides life-saving aid for victims of natural and man-made disasters, from earthquakes and hurricanes to armed conflicts. You know, this is the United States doing its share as the major power in the world to help those who have been impacted by these extreme events that caused immense harm and suffering through no cause of their own. And also, it would cut $202 million for some specialized agencies, including UNICEF, that's traditionally been led by an American. And the Chinese love this, because where we leave, they've made it no secret, they want to replace us. These are just a few of the examples of the irreparable harm these rescissions would cause to programs and organizations that have had long-standing bipartisan support. They serve our interest, and they promote U.S. global leadership. Mr. President, I understand the White House is looking everywhere it can, except the defense budget, to find revenue, and they need that revenue to offset the tax breaks that will go, by and large, to the richest Americans. But these rescissions are thoughtless and they're reckless. Leadership of the United States is not solely a function of military power. Soft power really makes a difference, and it's a function and a power that we have to use our resources to act as a full force multiplier for democratic principles, for free markets, and for building alliances. If these rescissions are approved, we'll be asked to explain why Congress did an about-face, literally in a matter of 2.5 months, and ceded U.S. global engagement influence to China. None of us want that. All of us will get that. You know, the president likes to talk about his historic mandate. He did win. It was 2 million votes out of 152 million cast. It was a small margin of victory, the smallest by a Republican presidential candidate since the 1900s. My point here is not so much the size of the mandate. Whatever the mandate, a president should embrace the responsibility that he or she has to the entire country, and that includes folks who didn't vote for him. I do not believe even those who did were voting to risk the lives and their children's lives by cutting funds to stop the spread of Ebola or measles or West Nile virus. This wasn't a mandate to shut down programs to defend democracy where it's under assault. This was not a vote to withdraw from UNICEF. This was not a vote necessarily to turn our back on the world's refugees, and including, in particular, Afghan refugees who saved lives of our men and women in uniform. You know, the talk about wasteful spending, we're with everybody. I have yet to meet a member of the United States Senate who's in favor of waste, fraud, and abuse. But we've got to identify it and then attack it, not assert that that's the justification for ending a program like PEPFAR that has proven to be efficient and effective in saving lives at very little cost. Mr. President, the final point I think all of us have to consider is the one I made at the beginning, and that is about the Article I responsibility of Congress. Alexander Hamilton warned about the excessive power that could reside in any one branch of government, in that for the well-being of our democracy, we had to maintain that competition between the branches, which required them to exercise and assert the authority that was given to each branch in the Constitution. And of course, Article 1 gives to the Congress the power to tax and the power to spend. And it is absolutely essential we do that carefully and wisely, because our constituents are the ones who are going to pay the bill through taxes we assess, and they're the ones who are going to receive the benefits through appropriations we make. But to abdicate that power, which is essentially what rescission would accommodate for the executive, is to turn over that power to the president. And it's not just a matter of it being this president, it's any president. In order for us to meet our responsibilities, we have to adhere to our constitutional responsibility under Article 1. That we are the ones who are subject to the will of the people, in the House every 2 years, in the Senate every 6 years, to account for how we tax and how we spend. Let's not dodge by delegating that power to the executive. Mr. President, I yield back. Senator Cornyn indicated the view of the hearing is that there was a constitutional crisis as a result of the cover-up of President Biden's decline. I believe there is a constitutional crisis. It's the collapse of Congress asserting its Article 1 authority to make decisions about the well-being of the American people. What has this Senate debated in the months that we've been here, other than nominations? Have we discussed the possible war with Iran? Have we had a serious discussion on the floor about the massive and mounting debt? Have we had any discussion about the abdication of congressional spending authority by the impoundment actions of an administration? Have we had a discussion about climate change that is causing havoc throughout the world? What we've done is gone to the floor and haven't debated. We've gone to the floor and voted on nominations. There's another issue of great concern to me, because I have enormous respect for my colleagues. Each and every one of us who was elected, it's the highest honor of our life. Each and every one of us came here because it is in our bones that we want to try to do something beneficial and make life better for the people we represent. And we have different points of view. But instead of this Congress debating those different points of view about oil exploration or about clean energy, about a good healthcare system, what we do is turn that debate into personal accusations of motivations, of cover-up, of conspiracy, of bad character, of demeaning folks who disagree with us. So we never get to the discussion about how do we have a healthcare system that works for the people in Texas, the people in Louisiana, and the people in Vermont. We never get to the discussion about are we going to deny the reality of what you know is true, climate change, and how do we address that in a way that maintains a strong economy and actually builds a strong economy. We get into the accusations that if you disagree with me, you're a left-wing radical. We get into these discussions that if you disagree with me, you're a Marxist. We get into these discussions that fan the perception of the people we all represent, who desire nothing more than be able to take care of the families, live with some security, make a contribution in the communities where they live. That if a person disagrees with you, they are a bad person. We will get nowhere with that approach. Now, so many of the things that happened in the Biden administration, I totally supported, and many of you totally opposed. Those are policy disagreements. He came in with COVID. We got through COVID. We can debate about how we did it, but that was an accomplishment. The American Rescue Plan, we had the biggest jobs creation in the history of the country. The CHIPS and Science Act, acknowledging that we have to have a strong economy and be able to have the best chips here manufactured in the United States. We did that. The federal disaster program improved significantly. And I can go on. And I'll take up something where we didn't do well, and that's immigration. You won that argument. But does it mean that those who disagreed with you and along the way were bad people, should be labeled Marxist, should be condemned? The American people ultimately gets to decide. But to the extent that we have a responsibility that we share, Republicans and Democrats, whichever side of the issue you're on, is to debate the issue and not debase the people who are in the debate. That's what I see as the crisis that we're facing in this Congress. Our refusal to engage in the serious discussion about the issues that are having such an impact on the people we represent. And I'm going to tell you what I think is a cover-up. I think this big, beautiful bill done by reconciliation, where by decision of the majority, not a single member of the minority who represent half of the citizens of this country can even be in the room when the terms and the policies are being debated. We are not there. That is what I call a cover-up, because our responsibility to the people we all represent is to debate health care, is to debate our budget, is to debate about the debt that we're going to be leaving future generations. And there is no debate in what is going to be decided in the private back rooms amid discussions, not even of all the Republicans, but of some Republican leaders. That's what's going to have a lasting impact on the people every one of us represents, whether it be in Missouri, Texas, North Carolina, or Louisiana, or Vermont. We can't even do our jobs because we're not allowed to be in the room. So, sure, we can enjoy the pleasure of looking back at the Biden administration and then getting into the weeds about when and where and how the president was acting at any given moment. But you know, I ask myself before I get into a debate, and before I do anything, why am I doing it? And if I do it, does it have the potential to make things better for the people I represent? And if the answer is no, it doesn't have any opportunity to help the folks in Vermont, I just shut up. That's what I do, because it won't help. What we're doing right now won't help. It will not help. And I ask myself, why in the world are we doing it? But we know the answer to that, because the politics that has been embraced in this Congress is the politics of accusation, of demeaning adversaries, of deflecting from engaging in the hard discussion about hard issues and trying to come to some common agreement that's going to be to the mutual benefit of all of the people that we represent. I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now introduce the witness.
Senator from Vermont.
There is time to kill this bill, and I hope we do. You know, as my colleague from Hawaii just said, what's happening in this bill is the infliction of bipartisan suffering. Whether it's in the state of Vermont or the state of West Virginia or the state of Tennessee, folks who are depending on Medicaid are going to lose it. Let me just give a couple of examples. When I was in the House, my good friend David McKinley, Republican, invited me to West Virginia, and we went to the Harrison coal mine. And I was very deeply moved, because the only people I know who work as hard as coal miners are dairy farmers. So we have a lot in common. Hard-working folks in Vermont, hard-working folks in West Virginia. But what this bill is going to do is threaten the access to health care that those West Virginia folks need, just like those folks in Vermont need. just like those folks in Tennessee made. It is not about whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It's not about whether you're from a red or blue state. It's actually about real people who work in coal mines, who work on dairy farms, who work in factories. Seniors who need the help of nursing homes. 2 out of 3 nursing home beds are paid for by Medicaid. Parents and disabled children so depend on health care, especially through Medicaid. And that's true in West Virginia. It's true in Nebraska. It's true in Tennessee, just as it is in Vermont. Let me just give a few numbers. In Vermont, 32,000 people are going to lose health care if this bill is passed. In West Virginia, 76,000 people will lose their health care coverage. In Tennessee, it's going to be 290,000 people who are going to lose their health care. It's not just those individuals who are going to lose health care. This budget reconciliation bill, the big beautiful bill, the big bad betrayal, there's real consequences to this that are going to be devastating to rural America. And we have a lot in common in Vermont with so many other parts of rural America, like West Virginia and like Tennessee. Rural hospitals will close, and people will be forced to travel for their care so far that they oftentimes won't be able to get it. And the sad reality, you take away people's health care, they're going to get sick and stay sick. You take away people's health care, and people are going to die. You know, the American Hospitals Association showed that this bill will likely close 338 hospitals in rural communities across the entire country, in your state and in mine. In Vermont, the fear is 3 out of 14 hospitals are at risk of closure with the passage of this bill. In West Virginia, 7 hospitals are at the risk of closure. And in Tennessee, 9 hospitals will be immediately at the risk of closure. You know what happens too, and it's like we don't even debate this, we don't even discuss it when this reality is about to strike a hammer blow to folks in rural America. If people lose their health care, it doesn't mean they don't need health care. It just means they can't pay for health care. So folks in Vermont who were depending on Medicaid are going to show up at our rural hospitals. Our hospitals are under a legal requirement to provide care. By the way, they would provide care even without a legal requirement, because that's what we do in rural America. We help folks who need help. But those hospitals, already on a thin margin, are not going to be able to afford it, and that's what threatens to have them go out of business. And then we know the spiral. Mr. President, this bill in Vermont is going to result in over $200 million pardon me, in uncompensated care in the next 10 years. In West Virginia, it's $1.4 billion. In Tennessee, it's over $3.5 billion. These rural hospitals, they provide critical care to people in need. We've got to protect the people first. We take away their hospitals, they have no protection. We've got to protect the struggles that communities in rural America have to keep a strong community sense against the enormous pressures that they face. There's a cruelty in this bill. There's an irresponsibility in the Senate if we don't acknowledge explicitly what the impact of this bill will be on the people we represent pardon me, on the hospitals that are dependent on us, and on the future of community strength in all of our rural communities. Let's kill this bill. Mr. President, I yield back. Mr. President.
The senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, exactly 2 years ago today, Vermont was struck with devastating floods. Those floods occurred not only a year ago today, but 2 years ago today. We had back-to-back floods in 2023 and 2024, doing about $1 billion worth of damage. And by the end of last year, every county in Vermont, all 14 counties, were hit by flooding. That $1 billion in damages affected homes, it affected businesses, it affected farms. We had 6,000 tons of debris that was removed. 77 state bridges and 63 state roads were closed. 704 miles of rail was closed and 159 miles of rail was closed. You know, we're far from alone in Vermont in having suffered enormous damage from wild weather events. And I see my colleague from Texas, to whom all of us extend our heartfelt sorrow and condolences at the flooding in Texas and the loss of lives of those wonderful Texans and those kids. This type of wild weather event can hit any one of our states at any time of its own choosing. And all of our states have been affected at one time or another. Now I want to talk about FEMA. Our experience in Vermont with FEMA is that it is absolutely essential and actually quite helpful in the immediate aftermath of the weather event. FEMA can pre-position resources. It has the capacity to surge resources and personnel, including people with real experience, and can coordinate with the local response, which is always very intense, from state resources and also from incredible outpouring of help from volunteers. But acknowledging the importance of FEMA in the immediate aftermath of a wild weather event in any of our states cannot disregard the fact that we need to reform FEMA. We need significant reform in FEMA. In the aftermath of the floods of 2023 and 2024, I visited all of our communities that were affected, and I followed up after that to talk to our local officials, our local volunteers, our local regional planning commissions. What worked and what didn't in the long-term response? And what I heard from officials, regardless of what their political orientation was, but local officials who had the real sense of urgency about getting the community back on its feet, was that FEMA was too slow, it was too bureaucratic, it was conflicting in the advice and information that it gave, and the ability to respond quickly and timely was really inhibited because of the centralization of decision-making authority in FEMA in Washington or in one of the regional locations where FEMA has administrative structures. And for Vermont, that ironically is Puerto Rico, which is not only not close to Vermont, but doesn't have anything close to the weather of Vermont. So the aftermath of repairing, getting the community back on its feet, that's where FEMA has failed us. And it's because of the centralization, in my view, and actually less important in my view, in the view of the local officials who have ongoing responsibility to get the community back on its feet. They just couldn't get answers. And let me just give some examples. When there is a culvert out, there's a road out, there's a bridge down, the people whose bridge is affected, the people who are threatened if we have a culvert replaced that's too small for what now we know will be the required carrying capacity of a culvert, the best people to make that are right there in that community. They have a sense of urgency. They have a commitment to the well-being of the people they represent in that community. They have the pressure of local community people watching to see if they're making progress on that recovery. But what has happened with FEMA, where everything is centralized, is you don't get an answer. Can we replace an 18-inch culvert with a 36-inch culvert? Can we do the bridge over Heartland Road, or can we make a change because the bridge over Route 5 is more important to get fixed, and that's the priority. One of the problems that our communities had is that the program managers, those are the people assigned by FEMA to serve communities as the bridge between the local community and FEMA, that they are changed constantly. So we've had in some of our small towns, and I'm talking towns with a population of like 300, they have one program manager after another, and over the course of a year and a half might have 7 or 8 program managers. And when that program manager is doing good work, but asking questions, and they're getting answers from the town clerk, a new program manager comes in, and it's as though nothing ever happened, and they have to start all over again. So it creates an enormous amount of frustration. We've got a situation with the town of Stannard, where the town clerk, this is the town of 300, the town had to make a decision about repaving a road. It's a gravel surface. And in order to get repaid, more than a year after the road had been repaired, with the town borrowing money it really couldn't afford for a project that clearly was ultimately going to be covered by FEMA, the town clerk was getting questions about what is the size of the gravel stones in that roadbed 12 inches down. That makes no sense. And what happens, of course, is it creates an immense amount of frustration. You know, a community that goes through a major weather event, in the shock of it, in the immediate aftermath, everyone rushes in to help. But then if it's your farm, if it's your business, if it's your home, you have to live with the effects of a slow-moving, non-responsive, centralized bureaucracy rather than get on with life and get an answer, yes or no, can you do this or not? So as a result of my discussions with the communities that have been affected in Vermont, today I have introduced a bill that's called the Disaster Assistance Improvement and Decentralization Aid Act. And quite simply, what this bill does is recognize that if you're going to get as quick a recovery as possible, as efficient a recovery as possible, as cost-effective recovery as possible, you actually have to delegate responsibility and authority to the local community that has to live with the consequences of the damage that has been done. There's got to be a partnership. There's got to be accountability. But where FEMA's role is going to be better in this is on oversight, to make sure that there is the proper use of taxpayer FEMA authorized money, but it's not going to micromanage local folks to death in the name of oversight. It's going to empower the local folks to make those decisions that have to be made right now about getting that community back on its feet. Every single one of us is horrified when the people we represent suffer the result of a wild and catastrophic weather event. The loss of life is horrifying. The destruction to the well-being of the community is inconsolable. But we can help by making that long-term recovery process work better. And the only way it's really going to work better is by having much more authority in local hands, the decisions that they can make about the culvert, about the bridge, about the grade of gravel that's to go into the repairs. So my hope, Madam President, is that we can come together as a Congress to fix FEMA so that its capacity to help our communities when they have been hurt so hard through no fault of their own, that they'll be able to get the capacity to make decisions, act, and get their community back on its feet. Now, I do oppose this discussion that we're hearing to some extent from President Trump and Secretary Noem about abolishing FEMA. You know, we can abolish FEMA when we can get an executive order abolishing and banning wild weather events. But that day is not going to come. But another storm in one of our communities inevitably will come. And what I want us to do for your state and mine is to have a FEMA that can be on hand, pre-positioned, and help in the immediate aftermath, and then be a partner, but where we put the decision-making in the capacity to act, in the flexibility that's necessary for the wise recovery of our communities in the hands of our local officials. I think this will make a much better recovery process for the folks all of us represent in the great United States of America. And Madam President, I yield back. Just at the outset, I just want to say what I think all of us believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can rest and relax and not then continue to provide information to local law enforcement and to you. So that was a mistake.
I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as something working with the public to identify that there was a subject
So if
in
you
custody.
if you put out a statement that says we've got our man, and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake?
But that's not what I said.
Well, I'll go on. That's my understanding. A second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go, and I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position, correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family, yes, I know this.
Okay, and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it fairly narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, you know, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as
Okay,
you
so
can
the
agree.
so-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
Again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling you.
No, that's
there's-
right. Let me ask you another question. You know, when you were here, you were rightly critical, not here actually, I guess it was on Cash's Corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country. Let me ask you this. You know, on the weekend of, according to flight tracker data, on the weekend of March 7th, an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson, and I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Okay. In April 5th, well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
You know, you got to use some judgment here.
So when I'm at home, I
would-
can't do what I'm doing when I go home. Everybody else is allowed to go home,
Let
just
me
not
keep
me.
going. No, I'm glad you go home. I love to go home, but I don't go home on a private jet. On April 5th,
They're not mandated to do so.
You attended a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky, and Flight Tracker says the FBI jet took you to and from New York City, where you don't live, right?
That's correct.
And on April 12th, on the following weekend, you attended a UFC a fight in Miami, also on the FBI jet, right?
That's correct.
So what's the cost to the taxpayer for those 3 flights?
But I pay the commercial equivalent per the regs and the law. And so just so you know, when you are comparing me
I
to
just
prior
asked what
directors.
I asked what the cost was, and you don't know, I take it.
Yeah, and what I've done with the use of the private jet is use Andrews Air Force Base versus
Okay.
Reagan National as what the other directors have done
Bottom line
to
here,
save the taxpayer
bottom
dollars.
line here, you flew home to Las Vegas. There's nobody else in the FBI who gets pay, they have to pay their own way if they want to go home, right? I mean, right?
Well, that's not accurate. Depending on where you're stationed, the FBI covers the bill to get home.
So are you telling me that FBI agents who are assigned in Washington, but who may live in Charlotte, they get paid by the FBI to
Sometimes
go home?
they do, yes.
Right. Another thing I want to say is this. You know, our local law enforcement has been stiffed. About $500 million in COP grants have been taken out of the budget. Those really help us in Burlington. They help us in Rutland. They really are important. And why in the world would we be cutting those COP grants when we need that local law enforcement, in part to partner with you?
Well, I think
Do you support that?
I think you're speaking to the Department of Justice grants, which I don't adjudicate, but also Vermont, just like every other state, has received a plus-up of FBI personnel.
Well, I'll tell you, that's not what we're seeing. The other thing, my understanding is that there's a requisition or an effort to get another plane for the FBI that would cost about $72 million. Is that right?
That's inaccurate. The FBI, because the jet, as you call it, is not my jet. We use it for operational needs. We use it for FTOCs. We use it for HRT.
But that's the one you fly in, right?
We have multiple fixed-wing assets, and one of them is on a wildly expensive lease that I deemed a waste of money, and I'm looking for a replacement in which the government can procure assets permanently.
Well, I would welcome you submitting to this committee the cost information about the jets that are under consideration. And according to our research, the specifications that are included in this request would result in an expenditure of between $72 million and $80 million.
That's inaccurate, but I'll happily get you the right
I
numbers.
welcome getting the specific information.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I'm not sure how I'll do it, but I'm sure you'll think of something.
You know, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Senator Blackburn. Thank you for the hearing and the work you've done, especially on Section 230. I'm sorry that I wasn't here to hear your testimony. As you know, sometimes we have to be in another place, but I do so I'm not going to ask you to testify again, but I just want to express to you my gratitude that as grieving parents who've suffered the nightmare that all of us who are parents fear more than anything else, that you're putting your pain into very constructive efforts to try to save the children of other parents. So you have my deepest gratitude. Also, you're having an impact. I want you to know that. I mean, you've got a cross-section of senators here, and we have a lot of disagreements about things, as all of us do in life. But I've seen real leadership on both sides of the aisle that want to protect other kids from the abuse that occurs as a result of the profit motivation of some of these extraordinarily wealthy tech companies. It's really unconscionable. And, you know, I want to acknowledge you, Senator Hawley, for your work on Section 230. Senator Blackburn, she and I were in the House together and began a version of the Kids Online Safety Act, and she has made an immense amount of progress with Senator Blumenthal to try to change that. So I will tell you this, you speak for the parents of Vermont. You really do. And it makes a difference. We don't know when, how, and whether we're going to get the relief that all parents absolutely are entitled to. But in fact, the law should be putting as its priority protecting the well-being of kids rather than the algorithmic and exponential acceleration of harmful chatbots that result in massive profits. So thank you. I speak particularly to the parents. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I join Senator Welch in thanking you and Senator Durman for this hearing, and also both of you being out front on these issues, as well